Lynette Scavo hairstyle is back in action. Hi guys, it's Michelle, and today's video is going to be another unsolved mysteries video for you guys. I love filming these types of videos because unsolved mysteries, first of all, I feel like it can bring some light to them. Hopefully one day these will be solved. Some of these ones are just so crazy and so bizarre. They just really freak me out that they've been unsolved, and some of these have been unsolved for so many years. So before we get into it, I would like to thank HelloFresh for sponsoring this video. I feel like you guys know I've worked with HelloFresh in the past. What you maybe don't know is that I genuinely actually am a subscriber to HelloFresh. I love it. HelloFresh is America's #1 meal kit, and it makes home cooking super easy, affordable, and just fun. HelloFresh is literally so amazing because they have more 5-star recipes than any other meal kit, so you always know you'll be getting something delicious. I seriously have been using them for, I would say, over, I think, 2 years maybe, and I have loved every single meal. It surprises me every time. This meal that I made today that you're seeing was actually incredible. HelloFresh is great because it cuts out all the stressful meal planning stages, which I love because it just gets sent to you, you get a recipe, and you just follow it, and you can have dinner on the table within 30 minutes or even 20 minutes for their quick and easy recipes. HelloFresh's pre-portioned ingredients not only means that there's less meal prepping for you, but also less food wasted. It's such a time saver, but also so sustainable as well. You can also easily change your delivery days or your food preferences, and you can skip a week if needed. HelloFresh also donated over 2.5 million meals in 2019, and this year HelloFresh is stepping up their food donations to help amid the coronavirus pandemic, which I think is really great, and that's also why using HelloFresh is great for me, because less trips to the grocery store, the better. Stay safe and stay inside if you can. You guys definitely need to check out HelloFresh. You can go to HelloFresh.com and use my code Platti80 to get a total of $80 off, including free shipping on your first box with purchase. So go to HelloFresh.com for more details. Thank you again to HelloFresh for sponsoring this video. But let's get into the unsolved mysteries. So the first unsolved mystery is one that just truly does not sit right with me. On November 24th of 1971, a man purchased a plane ticket under the name of Dan Cooper, later to be known as DB Cooper. He was on this flight from Portland to Seattle when he essentially hijacked the plane. It's very complicated and very odd. Basically, once this plane was in the air, DB Cooper handed a note to a flight attendant named Florence Schaffner, and she kind of just put it into her purse because she just assumed that it was some lonely guy who was just giving her his phone number, and she just didn't want to deal with it, so she just put it in her purse. And then he kind of leaned over and whispered to her, "You'd better look at that note because I have a bomb." So the note essentially said that he had a bomb and that he wanted $200,000 and also some parachutes. It also stated that he wanted the plane to land in Seattle so that they could let the passengers off and refuel the plane. So of course the flight attendant went to the cockpit to convey the message to the pilots, and the pilots obviously contacted air traffic control. Of course, air traffic control contacted the FBI and the Seattle police, and they ordered all of the employees to follow the hijackers' demands. The aircraft basically circled around Seattle for 2 hours so that the FBI and the Seattle police could collect the things that the hijacker wanted, which was $200,000, ended up being obviously counterfeit money that had a specific code that only this person would have, so that later they could probably find more details if someone had tried to use this counterfeit money, and then they could catch the hijacker. Once the FBI had the parachutes and all of the money, they were instructed to land in Seattle and let the other passengers off the plane. The reason that they thought that they were circling around for 2 hours is because of a technical difficulty or just a malfunction with the plane, so they didn't even have any idea what was going on. Once the passengers were let off board, this was when Cooper decided to come to the cockpit and kind of explain his plan to the flight attendants and to the rest of the crew. He informed the flight crew that his plan was to fly to Mexico City. The pilot, of course, was like, okay, but we're gonna have to stop to refuel in Nevada. So he agreed. This is where it gets really odd. They took off on the plane. Obviously, they had FBI-controlled planes following them. Cooper instructed all of the flight crew, including the flight attendants, remain in the cockpit with the door closed. Around 20 minutes after takeoff, the flight crew noticed that there was a flashing warning light on on the dashboard in the cockpit. This warning light was essentially indicating that the aft airstrip apparatus had been activated. The crew asked over the intercom if he needed any assistance with what he was doing, and he said no. Then the crew noticed a really huge change in air pressure, so they knew that the aft door had been opened. They landed in Reno, Nevada, and of course the FBI came in armed and ready to go, and Cooper was nowhere to be found. He had actually jumped out of the plane. What was odd is that none of the planes that were trailing behind the plane that Cooper jumped out of saw anyone jumping out. They didn't see any parachutes going off, but granted it was around 10 p.m. that they landed in Nevada, so it was pretty late and it could have been dark, and also it was apparently rainy and the conditions weren't too good. Of course, a huge search happened around the flight's path because at first they assumed that he was actually skilled at jumping out of planes and that he had survived the fall. It was later concluded that he probably didn't, just because the conditions were so rough. But either way, we still don't know, because of course this remains unsolved. There are truly only 4 pieces of significant evidence that have come up over the past few years, and none of them really point to anything. The first was found in November of 1978 when a placard printed with instructions on how to lower the aft stairs of a 727 Boeing plane was found by a deer hunter east of Castle Rock, Washington, which was in the flight's basic path. Probably the most significant evidence was found on February 10th of 1980. An 8-year-old boy was vacationing near Vancouver, Washington, when he uncovered 3 packets of the ransom cash. And like I said, since they had this specific serial number, they could definitely identify that this was 100% the ransom cash. It was also only a portion of the money, which is really interesting. And the other 2 pieces of evidence were found in 2017 by a group of volunteer investigators, and they essentially found a piece of a parachute strap that they thought looked decades old, and it was of course on the flight path as well, so they thought this maybe belonged to Cooper. They also found a piece of foam that they believed could have been his backpack or part of his backpack, but that's really the only evidence that ever came from this case, which is pretty crazy because this was so long ago. And although there have been quite a few suspects, I don't even think that any of them were worth mentioning. They either were all dismissed, or like it couldn't have been them, or just in general didn't really make sense. Like nothing had any hard evidence of where this man could be or if who he actually is, honestly. So it's pretty crazy. But in 2016, the FBI announced that they would no longer be investigating this cold case. It didn't seem like anything was pointing to anything substantial to the case. I just think if he hadn't survived the jump, there would have been a body by now. Like, it's been almost 50 years and they knew the general area of the flight path and they knew generally where he had jumped off the plane. I just feel like for sure they would have found something, and they really didn't find much evidence at all. So it's just super interesting and honestly really creepy overall to think that that's how you handle a hijacking situation. I know it was 1971, obviously it was pre 9/11, it was a lot of factors, but it's just crazy. Like, it's so crazy. I don't get why they didn't invade the plane like armed the Seattle airport before they even took off. I don't know, maybe like the FBI wasn't like ready to do that yet, but like I just feel like it doesn't make sense. Like a lot of the story is very odd to me, and I honestly couldn't believe it as I was reading. I was like, did this actually happen? I just felt like I was reading some weird movie script or something. Like I don't know. But what do you guys think happened? Do you think DB Cooper is still alive and out there? Personally, I do. Well, I don't know if he's still alive today, but I think that he survived that jump, because where else is he? I don't know. Honestly, probably one of the creepiest unsolved cases I have ever heard, because it just gives me an unsettling feeling that I can't describe. The next unsolved mystery that we're going to be talking about breaks my heart. It is so upsetting. It is the case about a man named Rey Rivera. If you guys watched Unsolved Mysteries on Netflix, this was one of the episodes, and I just found it so interesting and so bizarre that I felt like I needed to talk about it. My biggest issue with this case is there has to be multiple people who know what happened or kind of know what happened and just aren't saying anything. A man named Rey Rivera and his wife Allison Rivera decided to move from Los Angeles, California to Baltimore, Maryland. Essentially, Rey was a writer and he wanted to be a filmmaker, and that's why they were living in Los Angeles in the first place. But then Rey was contacted by his childhood friend, Porter Stansberry, and Porter wanted Rey to be a financial writer for him in Baltimore, Maryland. He decided to take this job offer even though they both planned on moving back to Los Angeles, because Rey ultimately wanted to do Hollywood writing, not financial writing, but he wanted to help his friend out. So not that long after they moved to Baltimore, Maryland, on May 16th of 2006, Allison left the house for a business trip that morning. And once she arrived at her hotel, she tried calling Rey and noticed that he didn't answer, and she found this kind of strange. One of her colleagues actually lived with Rey and Allison in Baltimore, so she decided to call her and see if she had heard from Rey or if everything was okay. The colleague basically said that she heard Rey get a phone call. He answered it and talked on the phone for a short amount of time and then left in a hurry. Sadly, that night, Rey never returned home, so this was when Allison decided to contact the rest of his family and get back to Baltimore. Porter Stansberry even offered $1,000 to anyone who had any information regarding Rey's whereabouts, but he still wouldn't talk to detectives, so it's a little bit suspicious. After searching for a while, some family members found Rey's vehicle parked near the Belvedere Hotel in Baltimore, Maryland. According to the parking attendant, the car had been parked there since May 16th, the day that he went missing. This was when some of Rey's friends were trying to look for clues, just trying to find any connection between Rey and the Belvedere Hotel. So they were standing on top of the parking garage, and they noticed that in this section of the Belvedere Hotel, there was actually a hole just in the middle of the building with 2 flip-flops nearby. Friends thought this was very suspicious, so they decided to contact the police about it. And sadly, once going into the abandoned conference room at the Belvedere Hotel on May 23rd of 2006, they discovered Rey's body. At first, investigators actually thought that this was a suicide and that he had jumped from the top of the Belvedere and fell into this building. There's a lot of reasons why we shouldn't believe that that's true. One of the biggest reasons, of course, is that the medical examiner actually ruled this as an undetermined death because of the inconsistencies with his injuries and the fall. Like, a lot of things wouldn't be, you know, technically possible or plausible at that point. According to a lot of people that followed this case, they think that it looked staged and basically that it was made to look like that Rey had committed suicide and jumped off the top of the building. One of the detectives who was working on this case even believes that it looked incredibly staged and that none of it made sense. If you look at the geometry of the entire thing, it would be very, very, very hard and almost impossible for Rey to have jumped from the Belvedere and landed in that spot specifically. Some people think that it would have been possible if he had been pushed, but even that is still kind of complicated. Not only did the angle of which he would have had to jump didn't make sense, they also found his glasses and his phone near the fall. Like they said, the flip-flops were the only thing that were kind of broken. Just one of the straps was out of place, basically, like, you know, when a flip-flop breaks like that, which if you have ever owned flip-flops, they can break like that from like anything. But the thing that's weird, obviously, is that his glasses were not shattered and his phone wasn't shattered, which according to the injuries that he had, if he had actually fallen or been pushed from that building, there is no way that his glasses and his phone wouldn't have been at least somewhat damaged, but they were completely intact. His wife Allison also mentions that there was a money clip that basically she gave to him, and it was really, really special to him. He wore it all the time. He always had it on him, and she can't find it anywhere. She couldn't find it in the house, in his car. It wasn't on him. She couldn't find it at all. It's also suspicious that's missing because where is the money clip? Allison and the rest of Rey's family were completely positive that they do not believe that Rey would have ever committed suicide. They don't think that that makes sense. They think that something happened to him. And Allison specifically has been incredibly determined to figure out exactly what it was that happened to Rey. During this investigation, it was actually determined that the phone call did come from Porter Stansberry's workplace, but the caller used the company switchboard, so they could never pinpoint exactly which person that it came from at the company, but they know it came from that company's building, which is obviously pretty sketchy. Porter Stansberry to this day refuses to talk about this publicly, refuses to answer any investigation questions, which is obviously very suspicious. Considering they were childhood friends, you would think that he would really be concerned with figuring out what happened to his friend. The company also lawyered up very quickly, so nobody in the company ever spoke about where the phone call came from to any detectives, which is super upsetting because obviously that could have been a huge clue. Weeks before before Rey disappeared, the alarm in Allison and Rey's house started going off and tripping like 2 times before Rey actually disappeared. And one of them was at 1 in the morning, like the day before he disappeared. And Allison remembers him just being horrified that this alarm had been tripping off and being horrified at the thought that someone was breaking into their home. I thought at first like anyone would be scared of that thought of someone breaking in, but at the same time, Allison claims that he was like never afraid of anything, and he just had this intense look of fear in his eyes that she had never seen before. So Allison strongly believes that Rey found out something that he wasn't supposed to know, and that is why what happened to him did. Like I said, Allison was super involved with trying to figure out what happened to her husband, and during the investigation, she found a letter that was taped to the back of his computer. She believes he wrote this letter the day that he went missing because there were scraps from the letter in the trash can as well. This note was incredibly odd and incredibly cryptic, but I do want you to remember that Rey was a writer. Some of the lines that stood out to his wife Allison were, quote, "Brothers and sisters, right now around the world volcanoes are erupting. What an awesome sight. Home virtue unites, death will not separate." So Allison decided to Google that last line because she was just like, what does that even mean? And she found out that it was a Freemason saying or expression that they commonly use. Freemasons essentially are a group of people that have been around for centuries. Basically a group of people, from what we know, have secret handshakes, secret symbolism, secrets in general that we're unsure of the meaning of any of it, honestly. Some people believe that it is satanic, some people believe that it's Illuminati related, and no one's quite sure. Some people think that it's just kind of a weird group that has kind of weird rituals and just weird secrets, but no one's really entirely sure what goes on. Allison claims that Rey was actually really interested in the Freemasons in general, so I don't know if that makes the note make more sense or less sense. Either way, the note also had pages of people that he personally knew in his life. Allison thought it was really weird because he left out a lot of like key people, but then wrote a bunch of other people that he just knew. And also he had list of his like favorite actors and list of his favorite movies. So a fan of the Netflix show decided to take to Reddit because they noticed that one of the movies that Rey listed was The Game. So The Game is a movie that was made in 1997, and it's essentially about a man who participates in a scheme that kind of blurs his concept of reality and ends with him thinking that he's lost everything, and ultimately he jumps off of the roof of a building, landing into another building, which obviously there's a similar connection to kind of what happened with Rey. Allison, however, doesn't really think that this makes sense. She's talked about this theory. She was like, he just really liked a lot of different movies. It's just a coincidence, which I kind of believe as well, because like I said, the family is very sure that he did not commit suicide, and him leaving in a hurry like that kind of adds up to that as well. Some people think that the note was actually coded in a way to look like the word help. I feel like this is kind of a stretch, but maybe it's true. And in general, Reddit has unbelievable amount of conspiracies about what this note could possibly mean. I'm actually just gonna link it below, like the thread, because it's really interesting to read. It's just too far in depth to go into every theory, but there are several, and a lot of people think that it could be code for, you know, something that he was trying to convey. Some people even just think the simple theory that he maybe had an idea for a screenplay and that's what he wrote in the note. I kind of am leaning towards that. I feel like the note might be unrelated, but maybe it is, who knows. Another thing that's super interesting regarding the Belvedere Hotel, which is that obviously there's camera footage and there is no footage of Rey going into the hotel and going onto the top of the building, which you would think would rule the whole thing out, but apparently I guess there could be side doors and side situations where he could have gone up to the top of the building. However, several people who don't know anything about the Belvedere Hotel tried to do this and tried to see like what they had to do to get to the top of the Belvedere Hotel. And a lot of them claim that they had to literally ask for help because they didn't know where they were going and there's no instructions on how to get to the rooftop. Not for nothing, but there is actually a camera on the rooftop of the Belvedere Hotel, and it happened to not be working the night that Rey disappeared, which is obviously very suspicious. What do you guys think of this case? I personally think it's interesting because Porter Stansberry is a very, very wealthy man, and we know what happens with wealthy people in this kind of situation. Seems like if they were to commit a crime like this, they would be able to buy themselves out of it. Horrifying to even think about, and I'm not claiming that that's true, and I'm not claiming that he did anything. I'm just saying I personally think it's weird that your childhood best friend is either murdered or committed suicide, even though it doesn't really add up to committing suicide, so it seems more like he was murdered and you don't have any part in trying to help the investigation. And not to mention that the phone call did come from his company, so what do you guys think? I really hope for Allison and for Rey's family that this case gets solved. So that is it. Thank you again to HelloFresh for sponsoring today's video. Like I said, please go check them out to get $80 off of your first purchase using the code Platti80 at HelloFresh.com. Check them out. You will not regret it. But that is it. If you guys like this video, please give it a big thumbs up. Let me know in the comments below what you guys thought about these unsolved mysteries, and if you have any information that could help solve some of these mysteries. I'll be linking different resources below so that you could reach out to those hotlines. But that is it. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram because I'm always posting really dope ass shit on there. Subscribe for new videos every week, and I will see you guys later. Bye.